Hello, everyone. My name is Robert Winfree, and what you're about to listen to is an old episode of a podcast I used to host called Everyone Loves a Bad Guy. This particular episode originally aired May 29th, 2015, and we're dealing with myself and Jayson Teasley as we talk about natural disasters, uh, especially in film. Not real life disasters. Uh, Not saying you couldn't, but the show is about media, fictional media, and more so than the real world. So we talk a little bit about your daylights, your Armageddons, your Deep Impact. This was partially inspired by the release of San Andreas, which was a disaster movie starring The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, that came out right around the same time we aired this, and there's a review of that over on Damn You Hollywood if you want my thoughts on that. But the disaster subgenre of film is a really interesting one. It's one that crops up every now and then. Roland Emmerich made a career out of it, and believe me, I don't have anything else to say about Moonfall other than what I said in our review, but it would have come up because it would be relevant. So we could talk about some of his movies. Day After Tomorrow. Um, what's the other one? 2012. So there's, again, you can look up that guy's filmography, and he likes blowing up the world. What do you want me to say? Um, so there's several we would have talked about had they come out again at the appropriate time, but we're talking disaster movies pre the recording, naturally. So there's a lot of fun stuff to talk about. Again, I mentioned I'm talking with Jayson Teasley. At the time, he was with a different group than he is now, in the interest of fairness. Now you find Jayson over at Mosaic Media, not from the cheap seats. So if you want to follow Jayson and some of his work, Mosaic Media is where you go. He's a pretty good guy, so if you're so inclined, go follow his stuff over there. All right, my rambling, hopefully coherent introduction out of the way. Thank you all very, very much for listening. Deeply appreciate it. I'll throw it back to the show, and I hope you all enjoy it.
When the devil is too busy and death a bit too much, they call on me by name, you see, for my special touch. To the gentlemen, I'm misfortune. To the ladies, I'm surprise. But call me by any name, anyway, it's all the same. I'm the fly in your suit, I'm the pebble in your shoe, I'm the bee beneath your bed, I'm the bump on every head, I'm the heel on which you slip, I'm the pin in every head, I'm the thorn in your side, makes you wiggle and writhe, and it's so easy when you're evil. This is the life you see, the devil tips his hat to me, I do it all because I'm evil, and I do it all for free. Your tears are all the pay I'll ever need.
Ah, yes, the dulcet sounds of Voltaire. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Everyone Loves a Bad Guy. I'm Robert Winfree, your host for this weekly look into all things villainous, evil, destructive, so on and so forth in the world across various mediums, because I'm like that. I don't mind going into television, movies, comics, literature, the whole nine yards. If it happens, I don't mind covering. Well, tonight we have, I'm synergizing a bit here, just a bit, but the latest Hollywood big-budget action disaster movie came out either today or yesterday, depending on where you are specifically. That, of course, being Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's movie San Andreas, which I have not seen yet and planning to see it tomorrow, and you can hear myself and Mark Radlich review that this coming Wednesday. So, cheap plug there for something coming up. But given lack of a better idea, for want of a better phrase, I figured this week we'd take a break from the deliberately evil and take a look at disaster movies, and how they play out. So all your favorites are. Well, hopefully, some of your favorites are going to be talked about. I've discovered a surprisingly high number of people enjoy disaster movies. Most disaster movies are not good on the objective scale, but most of them are at least fun. And I figured, okay, we'll take a look at some of the things Mother Nature has thrown our way. Earthquakes, tornadoes, shipwrecks, tsunamis, hurricanes, ice storms, meteor impacts, all of that good stuff. Because and those movies in general, just to see how, they don't usually have villains in the traditional sense, the circumstances bad enough, but take a look at, some of the worst ones, some of our favorite ones, and just kind of have a fun little discussion about that. Now, I'm joined, thankfully, I say thankfully, so you don't have to listen to me for 2 weeks in a row ramble to myself for 60 minutes. Nobody wants. Least of all you, the viewer. But the Radulich Broadcasting Network's Resident Evil Ginger, because every group has to have at least one of them. It's in some kind of contract somewhere. I have had legal check that out. But Jayson Teasley, host of From the Cheap Seats, is here with us. Jayson, thank you so much for kind of saving my bacon at the last minute here. How you doing?
All right, how you doing, Robert? No problem, man. I know how hard it is to do solo shows, so I have nothing to do till 2 a.m., so why not jump on and help you out?
Yeah, I appreciate that. And, there are certainly worse things you can do than talk with me. I mean, you could always, rub yourself with rubbing alcohol and find out just how many places you've nicked over the last, 24 hours.
Yeah, that would be bad.
This actually works out pretty well for me. If I'm asking or try to mention something that you don't want to have made public or whatnot, I apologize in advance. But you're an EMT, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So this works out even better for me then, because I'm talking to that and a first responder.
Yeah, I'm a first responder that has ran approximately a couple of MCIs here lately, which is mass casualty incidents.
Okay, so we got a real perspective on things that get fictionalized all the time. That works out very well. We've got a diverse bunch here on the Radulich Broadcasting Network. So, since you're here, let me ask you first, big budget disaster movies, they come in, again, all sorts of mediums as far as disasters. You got a favorite one? I've found everyone has at least one. So, do you have one?
That's a hard one. It's a hard one to narrow down, actually. I mean, if you go with like meteor showers and everything, Deep Impact has to rank up there. I also this is going to kind of surprise you. It's going to go back in old school. I mean, I would have to go with I actually enjoy Towering Inferno.
Paul Newman and Steve McQueen, great pairing.
that would people kind of forget about that every so often.
Yeah, they do, which is odd because it's a very good movie.
Oh yeah, it's highly underrated. But I mean, that's two very high-ranking natural disaster movies on my list. I can't think of a third one. I mean, I'm sure that in our discussion tonight we'll be able to cover quite a few others that I thoroughly enjoy. But just right off the top of my head, I mean, those two are at the forefront.
Well, let's start with Deep Impact. That's kind of the first one you brought up, and I wanted to bring that one up because it kind of it best exemplifies one of the things I talk about with when discussing disaster movies not having antagonists. There's no villain in Deep Impact. I mean, you have a few interpersonal conflicts. You have Jon Favreau on the space mission being kind of a douchebag, but that's kind of just Jon Favreau. But I mean, you don't have, even in the same way that you have with other disaster movies, you have kind of the token villain while they set up the carnage. You're left kind of bereft of villainy as far as Deep Impact goes. And I'm curious, you think very highly of it. I tend to enjoy that one as well. I'm just curious, do you think that hinders it at all? Do you think it helps it? How do how does that whole approach to the movie kind of play out for you?
Well, actually, it actually plays out to an advantage in my opinion, because you don't have a direct villain. I mean, you got the douchebaggery, but as a direct villain, you actually see kind of a humanity side of impending doom. I mean, and that's what's crazy about it, is because I mean, it's actually, it's not real like plausible, but I mean, who knows something like that could happen. I mean, you could have a giant meteor coming to Earth and destroy the entire world. And
Well,
there's nothing. You're
it happens.
helpless. There's nothing you can do about it. I mean, or you could find it out in space and then go hire Bruce Willis, get him to get a oil rig team, because it's much easier to teach roughneck oil riggers to be astronauts than it would be to teach astronauts to drill rocks, right?
Oh god, that movie. I have a real soft spot for Armageddon because it's. Bear in mind, I am well aware of how bad it is at various points, including being. Last I checked, it is the most scientifically impossible movie. It has the most scientific errors ever committed to screen.
Oh,
But
by
I
far.
can't help. But I can't help but enjoy that movie almost every time I watch it. It's one of the very few times Ben Affleck being on screen isn't a deterrent for me, and maybe that's because Bruce Willis spends a good 10 minutes trying to kill him with a shotgun, which just made me cheer for Bruce Willis all that much more. But no, I just and again, since we talked about Deep Impact, Armageddon's a pretty decent segue because they're not the same movie by any stretch, but they deal with the same theme of extraterrestrial rock hurtling towards the Earth. And so I'm curious, just for you, real briefly, if you could compare and contrast, why do you prefer Deep Impact?
Because Armageddon is, like you said, scientifically inaccurate, and it's more plausible to know of impending doom than, train Bruce Willis and a crew of misfits to become astronauts in what I think it was a mere 6 weeks or something. It wasn't very
like
long.
10 days.
I mean,
it was ridiculously short.
Space Cowboys even took a little while. I mean, Clint Eastwood even took a little while to become an astronaut. I mean, but
and
you
even
can
in
get
that
Bruce
movie,
Willis to do it in 10 days.
Well, in that movie, to be fair, they had been astronauts in their younger days, and only were just brought back as they were older. And how can you hate a movie that is a fist fight between Clint Eastwood and Tommy Lee Jones?
Exactly. I mean, how great is that? But I mean, honestly, I love Deep Impact because I'm really a sadistic person, which is, I don't know if we'll actually cover this movie as a natural disaster because, it's kind of far-fetched sci-fi. But one of the greatest movie endings, in my opinion, that has ever happened was The Mist.
Oh, you, my friend. You stepped in there a little bit. I think that is one of the greatest movie endings ever. Not like, I mean, just the twist. I think that is so great, and that's like I feel with Deep Impact. It's impending doom. I mean, there's nothing you can do about it except be with the ones you love, and it goes back to the adage of when it's your time to go, you're going to go regardless. And this is kind of plays to that. It's Mother Nature's a bitch. Yeah, and I get a chuckle out of that movie just because one of the Deep Impact. I'll bring up The Mist in just a second or two here. But as far as Deep Impact goes, I get a kick out of the closing bit of that movie because it's Elijah Wood dragging another round-faced person up a mountain while they're desperately trying to protect something. In this case, a baby instead of a ring, but foreshadowing. And in this one, he has a dirt bike I never realized that. That's kind of interesting. You pointed that out. Now I will never be able to watch it the same way again. I find weird connections like that just because they amuse me mentally. No, but I like Deep Impact. I really do. It's the fact that it's very realistic and as far as its depiction goes is definitely a mark in its favor. You have people trying to evacuate, not being able to. You have the politicians trying to continually pacify everyone with everything's okay, we have plans, things are going to be fine, and just slowly things continuing to fall out from under them at every opportunity until you get the heroic sacrifice of that chick from Weeds and Robert Duvall. Is that Mary Louise Parker? And the rest of that crew who sacrificed themselves to destroy the larger of the two comet fragments. It's a disaster movie. You have to have people die on screen or it defeats the purpose. But real briefly, because you brought up The Mist, it took me a while to divorce myself emotionally from the end of that movie. And the reason for that is pretty simple and completely unintentional. The first Stephen King book I ever read was Skeleton, which is a collection of short stories, the first one of which is the novella The Mist. So, literally, my introduction to one of my favorite authors and a bunch of my favorite books came with The Mist. So it always held a very special place for me emotionally. And then to see Frank Darabont completely change the ending, I was pissed walking out of that theater. I can't say I was actively angry for a period of time until I kind of got a little bit of perspective, divorced the emotion from it. No, it's a ballsy ending there. So again, getting a major studio to go along with that depressing of an ending, very impressive, because that's one of the bleakest and not hopeless endings, because by its definition there's hope. It's just extremely depressing, and I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it. But that's a gutsy ending to tack onto a Hollywood movie, which generally do not have endings of that nature. God, Mist. I loved that movie so much. And then,
okay, have you realized something else about The Mist? What connection it has to a popular show on TV right now?
Let's see.
The Mist is where everybody from The Walking Dead met.
That's true. Oh God, Lori Holden's on there. There's what, 3 or 4 of them?
I think there's like 4. So if anybody knows anyone knows where the zombie outbreak started, it started with The Mist. That's how everybody from Walking Dead really met.
Oh, and Thomas Jane was just ahead of the curve in wanting Andrea dead.
Exactly.
Good for him being ahead of the curve. Back to your other. Sorry, go ahead.
Foreshadowing.
Yeah. Now back to the other movie though, to kind of bring up what we get with villains for these movies, by and large, and back to your Towering Inferno, which constantly overlooked, again, in the filmographies of both Paul Newman and Steve McQueen. Prolific actors, very talented as well. But you get a few kind of early villains. In this case, by and large, with disaster movies, you get villains who are either neglectful or just very, very cheap. In the case of the Towering Inferno, it's Richard Chamberlain. I just remembered that Richard Chamberlain's in that movie too.
Yes, he is.
Oh, the great Richard Chamberlain is the electrical engineer?
Fred Astaire's in it. O.J. Simpson's in it.
I knew
Robert Wagner. Faye Dunaway.
Oh, that's a cast.
Yeah, I mean, and you look at it now and you're like, oh yeah, I do remember seeing them. Oh wait, yeah, I do remember that. Wow, this had a great cast.
That's
especially for 1974.
Before the kind of boom of the supercast.
Yeah,
those became real popular in the 80s. But anyway, Richard Chamberlain is, I believe, the electrical engineer for this building.
Yeah, he's a building's electrical engineer, and it basically he's cutting corners. Like, I mean, typically, what building supervisor or construction crew wouldn't cut corners to save money to pocket it? I mean, you see it. You see a lot of shoddy work now, that comes to the forefront.
It's a scam as old as time, and it's a reason, a lot of unions or mobsters run construction outfits. There's openings to be had if you're willing to take them.
Oh, by far. I mean, and like I said, it's just and this is like an impending doom. I like movies with impending dooms because, I mean, the fire starts on, I think it's the 81st floor, if I'm not mistaken.
Something like that. It's in the 80s.
Yeah, and it was a 138-story building. Roughly, a little over halfway up, the building catches fire. And
that's kind of the nightmare scenario there. I mean, because what are you going to do? Are you going to run hoses, 80 stories up? Are you going to... I mean, I remember... real world application, of course. On September 11th, when the Twin Towers were struck by aircraft. Thanks a lot, terrorists. I remember, I was at school watching it, and one of the things that was being discussed by the newscasters was, how are you going to stop the fire? Because, again, you can't run hoses, however far up they were. It's just not feasible. You can't have... you can't dump water on it from above because it's at an angle. It's just, I mean, if you're trying to stop that kind of a fire, there's almost nothing you can do by and large. It's very, very difficult.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's basically you're just left to get people below the fire into safety and contain the surroundings. I mean, that's the only option you have. And I mean, as I've never had to witness anything like this, thank God. But I mean, as a first responder, it's kind of I do have friends on But as an EMT, I have made friends with firefighters and everything, and stuff like you discussed, and that's what they tell you. They say like if there's a certain point you can go to, and then it's basically you, as harsh as it may sound, you have to say what you can and do minimal and provide make sure there's minimal damage after the fact.
Well, if you don't mind a real brief, somewhat different discussion, I mean, back in the teens, early 1900s and teens, before you had, massive indoor plumbing like we have today, firefighters, you had what you could take with you in the engine that you pulled, and if you couldn't contain a fire, the basic idea was, this is where the adage or the discussion of hook and ladder comes from. Every major building in a major city had hooks attached to the structure so that if it lit on fire, you could collapse it if you were a firefighter. That's what you tried to do to prevent it from spreading. That was the first thing you had to do, was because if that gets out of hand, there aren't the resources to stop it, and you get the Chicago fire, the London fire, and I forget the exact details on those years. But that's what caused those, was fires that start and then the resources don't physically exist to put them out, and you don't have proper containment.
Yeah, I mean it's and back then as well. I mean buildings were just so. I mean they wasn't as spaced out either. I mean a lot of buildings were like right on top of each other. So if one building caught on fire, you might have 4 or 5 catch on fire in mere moments.
Yeah, everything was on top of each other. Everything was made of wood, by and large. It was a really dangerous kind of situation for major metropolitan cities at that time. Fire was, that was the nightmare for, cities, was a fire that gets from one house to the next. That kept people awake at night. And that's, again, you see that a little bit with, again, Towering Inferno, where it's difficult to stop it. That just because of the physics and the physical locations of it and everything. Speaking of kind of, man-made disasters as far as that goes, I've got one of my favorite disaster movies, localized disaster movies that I can pop in from time to time is, early 90s, I want to say, Stallone, called Daylight. I'm wondering if you've seen that one or if you're going to be...
Yeah, I'm thinking it. I'm thinking of something else. I'm thinking of the Avalanche movie that he was the ski patrolman on. I don't think I've seen that.
Cliffhanger. Yeah, I think the one you're thinking of is Cliffhanger. Hey, John Lithgow's in that movie.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen. I may have seen Daylight. I'm not. Is that the one where it's the tunnel?
That's the one with in the tunnel.
Okay. Yeah, I have seen.
That's one and again, you're without villainy. By and large, you have people illegally transporting waste, which you shouldn't do, and then you have people involved in a high-speed chase to crash into it and cause the explosion. But, they're all dead in the first 10 minutes. At which point you've got, kind of rich douchebag Viggo Mortensen, a couple of the people actually in the tunnel who are just difficult, but there's no, opposing force. It's them desperately trying to survive. And that's, again, disaster movies are easy, by and large. You have an appropriate disaster, you have attractive people on the screen, and you just deal with it in a timely manner that is consistent within its own universe. It doesn't have to be completely scientifically accurate as long as everything within the movie makes sense, which is, again, Armageddon being, hey, look, you've done things that don't make sense, consequently. Again, I have a soft spot for it because I enjoy it, but that doesn't make it good.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy how I'm sitting here. I'm looking at a list of disaster movies, and I see a couple that definitely are in my top 5 that hopefully we'll get to talk about. But yeah, I mean, Daylight isn't. It's like I said, it's been a while since I've seen it. But yeah, it's a good movie. I will say that it's one of the better Stallone movies outside of Rocky, the Rocky franchise.
Even then, there are certain entries into that series.
We won't touch on that. A couple of those could be disaster movies in themselves.
Oh, no kidding. All right. We've touched on, again, kind of man-made disasters. We might hit a few more of those as we go along. One of my first disaster movies that I recall seeing in theaters, having fun with, but I even remember who I went to see it with. Crazily enough, one of my best friends when I was growing up. He and I went to go see Twister in theaters in the early '90s, mid '90s. I want to say it was like '96. That's when it came out. I can't remember off the top of my head its release year. But that one, I hold that as a very as one of the better disaster movies ever committed to film. The science makes sense. The acting is by and large, it's passable to good. The visual effects are wonderful. I want to get your perspective on this. You're in West Virginia. Okay, so tornadoes aren't necessarily a big part of your everyday life, but they have happened that far. They have happened in that part of the country from time to time, right?
Yeah,
forgive me for being off on that.
No, actually, there was one in Ohio just beginning of this part of the week. Not even 4 hours from where I live.
Fun. So anyway, about Twister then, Bill Paxton, Helen Hunt, and Helen Hunt being just kind of what it is. But that one you've seen, because that was a pretty big deal when it came out. That's actually the first one I remember having the big THX sound in the beginning, which haunted moviegoers for years.
Yeah, Twister was a big deal. I mean, my fiance now, she was really scarred for life by Twister. She anytime it gets like real dark, cloudy, and it looks like it's going to rain real hard, she gets a little nervous. But I mean, Twister was a big deal. I mean, a lot of people have seen that as a I'm trying to look for I need Sean Comer's wordsmith ability right now. To become the ever adventurous storm chaser and then realize, what the hell am I doing? This is insanity. Just because I've seen it on a movie doesn't mean that I should go do it myself.
Yeah, well, that movie inspired a generation of storm chasers, I imagine, and the few who actually stuck with it.
It created the Weather Channel.
Pretty much. God, so we can blame Jan DeBont for that, both positive and negative. Man, that, again, the series of tornadoes, I'm curious, tornadoes have popped up in various movies from time to time. I would say Twister's probably the best, tornado centric movie. You got any others that deal with tornadoes that you come to your head?
The only other one, it wouldn't be tornadoes, I don't guess. Of course you have Sharknado. I mean, how can you leave Sharknado off? I mean, it's the greatest thing ever. A tornado with shark. I still have yet to watch either one of them. I refuse to watch either one of them.
I have not seen either one. Even if I didn't think it was one of the dumbest concepts ever committed to film, including everything done by the Sci-Fi Network, and that's saying something, because they have something called Chupacabra versus the Alamo. I kid you not. I couldn't make that up if I tried. You have Tara Reid on screen for 90 minutes, and who's that?
Hey, I did like Tara Reid and Van Wilder, but that's a whole nother story. But I mean, tornado and hurricanes. You could also throw. I mean, loosely, you could throw in on the flip side of me talking about Shannon. You could throw Day After Tomorrow in there. I mean, that had a lot of mixture natural disasters that kind of was a result of each other.
I like The Day After Tomorrow. Again, I'm not going to pretend it's good, by and large, but I saw that in theaters. I'll still watch it if it comes on TV. If I'm scrolling through and I have nothing better to do and I see The Day After Tomorrow, I'll watch it.
Yeah, Shannon's dad watches it every night. Every night he puts that movie on, and I'm like, it's an okay movie, but I can't watch it every night going to bed.
Now, I enjoy that one because I was very worried with that movie when I went to see it that we would get a lot of preaching about, the environment and the damage humans have caused to it and whatnot. And thankfully, that was kept to a minimum. It was used as a brief setup to the rest of the movie, but it wasn't dwelt on. It wasn't hammered home. It was very much, again, just kind of pushing the plot forward. And incidentally, I don't want to go on a tangent about climate change and all of the people out there on both sides, because there's nothing but, mudslinging on both. People want to stand on either side of a fence and yell at each other, probably while they're drunk, and I don't feel compelled to get in the middle of that. That's my analogy for the environmental at large.
Yeah, I mean, other than that, I mean, Twister and Day After Tomorrow, which, I mean, Day After Tomorrow will cover a lot of actual other
Oh no,
situation.
the super, cold vortex hurricane doohickeys that they show from outer space were
Yeah.
absolutely awesome.
I mean, that's the only two major worthwhile hurricane tornado things that I can pull out off the top of my head right now.
Day After Tomorrow has again tornadoes, hurricanes. There's a couple of nice tidal waves that come through there.
Yeah. Speaking of tidal waves, what is your favorite water origin disaster? Because the
Oh.
one I'm picking, I don't see it as a disaster movie per se, but it's a damn good movie.
Well, I think technically speaking, the best would probably be, it was released just a couple of years ago. Ewan McGregor and Naomi Watts' vehicle called The Impossible, actually about the tsunami that hit Indonesia a few years back.
See, I have not seen that, but I was going along the lines of Perfect Storm.
Oh yeah, George Clooney and Mark Wahlberg. Oh boy, I know that's a very
Two
good
of
one
your favorite
actually.
actors.
Oh God, George. Why don't you choose your roles better? And Mark Wahlberg. I don't like Mark Wahlberg by and large, but no, I actually just saw that for the first time not too long ago. It just didn't interest me by and large. I was actually impressed with that movie. They by and large stuck to the facts of that particular incident. The convergence of cells. The artistic license was a minimum, and there were places you had to have it because you had no factual evidence, so you had to kind of monkey with it. No, as far as disasters at sea go, it's a very good one. Again, Clooney and Wahlberg are fine. The rest of the crew of that particular boat is fine. The fact that again we get a ballsy ending in that our heroes, for want of a better phrase, don't make it home. Everyone on that. Apologies for spoiling a movie that's over 10 years old, but George Clooney, Mark Wahlberg, that whole ship is lost
it's
at
the
sea.
rule. If it's over 10 years old,
Is that what we
yeah,
have to
it's the
do? Wait, I
golden
tell you,
rule.
golden rule. I got somebody.
10 years.
10 years. I don't know how many people, if I've told this enough, but I actually had someone get pissed at me for spoiling the end of The Hobbit.
Oh yeah, I
Which
remember.
It
I remember
boggles
you
my
telling that.
mind. That book is older than I am.
No, what's funny is I actually had somebody get mad at me because something that was in the Walking Dead comic from like one of the first 10 issues, and I had mentioned it, and they was like, I haven't read that yet. I'm like, well, you know what? You've
Point,
had
it's on
plenty of
you.
time. You've had plenty of time to read it. So I
No,
mean,
yeah, at this point, it's on you.
yeah, I mean, the only other water ones I could think of is Poseidon.
Which is what
The
I kind
the
of wanted to bring up, just for no other reason than to compare and contrast the original with the remake, because the original Poseidon Adventure is, again, as far as good movies go, not so much, but it's a very enjoyable movie. And then the remake is, and for those of you who don't know, the Poseidon Adventure and all of its various derivatives deal with a luxury liner at sea hit by a rogue wave, which as far as and it's capsized, it's turned upside down, and it's a group of people trying to escape before the whole thing sinks. And the original stars Gene Hackman. It's kind of his starring vehicle, and again, it's just enjoyable kind of from start to finish. The remake was just a flop. I mean, despite the opening kind of bit where the ship is capsized is a very impressive visual feat. I mean, the whole thing is CGI'd, but they made a concentrated effort to make it look like they actually tipped a boat over. It's one of the most detailed computer-generated images and sequences ever committed to film, and I can appreciate that. But, I mean, have you seen both? And if so, where do you think the remake just failed so miserably? Because it seems like it's missing everything that made the first one watchable.
I have not seen the original. I've never had the opportunity to secure a copy or had the pleasure of watching the original, but I've had people that we've discussed, various movies, and they bring it up as reference quite often. But I did see the remake, and with no prior knowledge, I still thought the remake sucked. It took me out because it was like they concentrated too much on the the effects and none on the.
Yeah, and that's one of the things about disaster movies in general. You're never going to get fully involved, very good stories out of them. by and large. I mean, again, the number of really, like, legitimately great disaster movies, it's really slim. And no, I don't count Titanic, and I don't care if you disagree. I don't consider Titanic to be all that great of a movie. It's a fine movie, but it's not, my perspective at least. Everyone out there can feel free to throw things at me. But again, you have to make them watchable, and again, great story, not really going to happen. But you need some semblance of a story. I mean, just enough to kind of, keep everything moving. You need characters that you care about, and I'm sorry, but Josh Lucas is not that guy. I don't think anyone cares about Josh Lucas ever.
No, I think the best thing that happened in the movie was him dying.
Josh Lucas doesn't die in that movie. He makes
him facing death. He doesn't.
No, Kurt Russell does.
Well, everybody was hoping
me.
It would depress
believe me, that movie was not memorable enough to, names and whatnot getting confused. Perfectly natural. No one stood out in that movie, which is really kind of sad because, again, you should be able to make a watchable movie out of that. And they just didn't. It was just poorly written. The dialogue is so bad. Oh, so bad. I'm trying to think if there's any other, disaster at sea worth discussing. I mean, I suppose you could bring up Titanic if you want to, which, again, there are good things about Titanic, don't get me wrong. I don't know, my opinion of that movie changes depending on my mood by and large, which is an odd thing to have happen, but yeah, it's real curious. I mean, the darn thing was a cultural phenomenon. It's still, like, one of the highest grossing movies of all time, if not the highest grossing. Some really impressive visual effects in that movie, a nice score. The acting is fine, by and large. I mean, it's not great, but it's okay. So, again, is there anything about that you might want to bring up? Because I've kind of said my piece about that movie at various times in various places.
Nah, not really. I mean, what's to be said about it that hasn't already been said?
Alrighty.
Except there was a Titanic out there.
Oh, yes, there was.
How can you have a Titanic? And this also brings up the point that there are some people today, some we'll say children, that actually think that Leonardo DiCaprio actually died in Titanic. And Titanic is not a historical event, just a movie.
Oh, God. First of all, Leonardo DiCaprio is not dead. He's desperately trying to win. He's desperately trying to win an Oscar. You know the supreme irony of Leonardo DiCaprio's life? He's going to die without winning one. 10 years later, they're going to make a movie about how he never won an Oscar, and the guy who plays Leonardo DiCaprio is going to win the Oscar for Best Actor.
That will be hilarious.
And yes, I will laugh.
I will laugh very, very hard. I'm trying to find. There's a movie out there that I'm trying to find that actually it was not a bad movie. It was just really out there, and I was thinking it was made by Kevin Smith, and it was a earthquake movie by Kevin Smith, and I cannot find it. I thought it was a Kevin Smith movie. If anybody listening knows what I'm talking about, it was like they was at Rio de Janeiro. Earthquake hits Rio de Janeiro and everything, and it actually has villains in it. On top of the earthquake and the chaos, there's actually villains. There's actual rape in this movie. So that you have that. You have rape. I can't think of it. I'm going to be searching as you continue to talk. I'm sorry, Robert.
No, go ahead. Hey, I've done it plenty of times. Let me know if you come up with it. Actually, speaking of earthquakes again, which kind of plays into the overall theme tonight, seeing as we're kind of talking about San Andreas, which I need to go see because I'm reviewing it. One of the original, I would say, disaster movies. I mean, not the original, but certainly one of the more, for want of a better phrase, modern ones took place in 1974 with a movie conveniently enough titled Earthquake.
Well, you'll have that.
Stars Charlton Heston. Actually, Walter Matthau's in that as well. Fun, and But the big kind of gimmick with Earthquake was what? You would have shaking in the theater?
Yes, and there was an actual ride when Universal Studios opened up based on this. I wrote it many times.
Yeah, I seem to recall that. And again, as far as gimmicking a theater goes, that's got to be up there with, what was it, Chiller or the Tickler, one of those things that where they would actually rig theaters to shock people. which I found highly amusing. The
I
Tingler, something like that.
I
Old
have
Vincent
never
Price
heard of
movie.
it.
It's an old Vincent Price movie.
That
No, it's no. So I mean, earthquakes. The sad thing about earthquakes is there's not a lot of successful disaster movies based around an earthquake, which is kind of an odd thing. Well, I suppose it makes sense because I mean, most people who die from earthquakes die not as a result of the actual earthquake, but as a result of things associated with the earthquake. Structural. I mean. Structural collapse, okay, caused by the earthquake. Mudslide afterward, I can't blame the earthquake. Tsunami caused by earthquake is its own disaster. I mean, again, that's kind of its own thing. Explosions from gas leaks, fires. I mean, can you really blame an earthquake for that? I mean, it's a precipitating event, but do you say they were killed by an earthquake or they were killed by a fire?
I'm going to say the structural damage and collapsing buildings, and then fire.
Okay. No,
I think I found the movie.
Okay.
I'm making sure that I've seen it. It was not. Yes, it was not. Kevin Smith. It was an Eli Roth movie called Aftershock.
Good old Eli Roth.
It was actually not bad. It actually had some interesting takes on things. Pretty much how everything just collapses. It came out in 2012 or 2010. Yeah, it actually starred Eli Roth.
Yeah, Eli.
Yeah.
Did he make it or is he just in it?
He's in it. He produced it and he stars in it.
Okay. No, I'm just going to talk about him as a director for a minute because
So
Eli
there's
Roth
two
has
strikes again.
Eli Roth has a couple of decent movies that he's made. Of course, that's buried under the mountains and mountains of crap he's made as well. God, I will forever. Eli Roth. If for no other reason than he started the Hostel series, I don't need a reason other than that to dislike his movies in general.
Now the first Hostel I enjoyed. The following ones not so much, but the first Hostel I enjoyed simply because it was pretty much the grotesque horror porn, as Mark likes to call it.
It's torture porn. That's what those movies are.
Yeah, but I mean it gave it was something for its time. It was something fresh. I mean it was just taking a folk legend of Americans going to foreign countries and being murdered for sport and for fun, and it actually put it out there. And I'm pretty sure since then I would not beg to differ that has actually happened at some point. Maybe they need to do that with Eli Roth after making some of the movies and choices that he has made.
Oh, come on. He was the Bear Jew.
Well, I mean, I love Cabin in
the first Cabin in the Woods is not the worst thing in the world. That's very true. He did an example of found footage, by and large, done correctly, mind you, called The Last Sacrament, I think, last year. If you have the time, look it up. It's again, it's found footage, so you got some of the problems that come along with that style of filmmaking, but it basically is it's a functional retelling of the Jonestown issue and story and mass suicide and whatnot, just with a updated to include a few modern things, but it's that story basically. It's just told from the inside and is by and large well done. The guy they got to play the cult leader actually did a very good job. I forget his name off the top of my head. I can't remember, but it is again, if you're into horror movies and whatnot and don't mind found footage, I'd say it's worth looking up and giving a watch to. It streams on Netflix, I believe.
I think I know what you're talking about. They go like he's goes to like this this farmhouse, and they're like torturing the daughter or something, and then you find out the twist at the end is like, or am I thinking of a different movie?
You're thinking of a different one. You're thinking of one of the Exorcism, not the Exorcist movie, mind you, but a movie dealing with exorcism.
Okay.
And I can't remember which one it is, but I do know what either that or it's one of those ones that came out in the 11 and 12s that dealt with the end of the world via prophecy and whatnot. There were plenty of those too. I do kind of remember the movie you're talking about, and I can't remember its title.
The trailer looked amazing. The trailer made the movie look amazing. The movie fell flat due to the trailer. Trailer had all the good parts in it.
Yeah, that happens. I imagine Terminator Genesis is going to suffer from that same problem. In addition to just being poorly
suffer
written.
from the fact that androids. It's going to suffer from the fact that androids actually age.
Human tissue ages. I can buy that. Yeah, again, as long as they don't do anything. I'll accept older Arnold Schwarzenegger because the Terminators are machines surrounded in living tissue. Living tissue decays, so it would age normally. So if you have a very old Terminator, I imagine while the machinery could be completely fine, the external tissue would age as a human does, if I had to guess. But the issue is they spoiled the entire plot in the trailer, and which is gonna aggravate.
Okay, we've been on a 10-minute tangent.
We have.
Of
that's about the limit.
movie.
That's about Terminator Genesis is going to be a disaster, so I'll claim that was at least partially on track.
Well, there we go.
Now, the last natural disaster I think that I haven't touched on here that that should deserve it would be volcanic eruptions, which have been committed to the big screen a few times. Specifically, a couple of movies that I've seen many, many times. Volcano and Dante's Peak, which are two very different takes on, volcanic eruptions. One is small town in the Cascade Mountain Range in Washington, the Pacific Northwest. The other is in Los Angeles. They're an interesting kind of contrast to each other. So, again, have you seen either of those? And if so, you got a favorite out of the two of them?
I have not watched either one of these since they came out in '97, which I was 18 years old. So yeah, it's been quite some time. It's and I don't remember that much about them. I remember the one. I remember a little bit more about Volcano because then Volcano that was the one in downtown LA, right?
Yeah. Tommy Lee Jones stars in it.
Yeah. Don Cheadle, Tommy Lee Jones. Yeah. This is the one that I remember a little bit better is Volcano because it was on that urban scale of a major metropolis.
Yeah, the La Brea tar pits basically turning into an active volcano. I enjoy both of them. They're very different takes on it. But volcanic eruptions are one of those things that it's very you can't really stop it. Once it starts, it's going to happen. Magma becomes lava, spews out, and you have to deal with it. And again, there's different scales of eruptions. Everyone. The last major volcanic eruption in the United States was Mount St. Helens, I believe. Well, okay, let me qualify that with the constant volcanic activity in the islands of Hawaii are not counting for this. Because they have, again, constant volcanic activity over there because those islands are situated on the edge of two conflicting tectonic plates. Consequently, you've got the constant process of subduction going on, which is what leads to the formation of islands and consequently a lot of volcanic activity. So we're putting aside the constant minor eruptions from there. The last major eruption in the United States, I believe, was Mount St. Helens in, what was it, 84?
Yeah, I'm thinking mid-80s, 83,
early
84.
80s, 83 or 84.
Yeah, I mean, that's the last known that I think it's the only one that's happening, and it happened during my lifetime, and it covered like massive amount of the state with ash. Because you don't only have to worry about the molten lava and fire that's coming out of this thing. You actually have to worry about what it puts into the atmosphere.
Oh, that's a much bigger deal by and large. Again, the lava's going to cool down, lose momentum before it gets too far. Resulting fires might be a bit of a problem, but if you're far enough away from civilization, wildfires like that are a part of the natural ecosystem, and constantly suppressing them actually causes more harm than good. And that's not me being an environmental activist or what have you. That's simply the way things work. But you get a bunch of poisonous material, a lot of ash, rock, debris, and whatnot launched into the upper atmosphere and spreading over a good portion of the state. That's gonna cause a lot of problems. You breathe that stuff in, it can, maybe not kill you right away, but that'll impair your breathing forever. Again, the big one there that kind of gets, and I get to show off a bit of my intellectualism here, but you will get a lot of pneumona ultramicroscopic silicovolcanoconiosis from things like that, because that's what caused it. Of course, that's colloquial known as black lung or miner's lung, because it's exponentially easier to say. But no, yeah, I actually I lived in Washington for about a year. After that eruption, several years after that. I lived in Oregon for 5 years or so too. I actually drove around Mount St. Helens and saw. Again, this would have been it would have been over a decade after the eruption. You could still see the resulting devastation. All of the dead trees from all of the various chemicals, sulfur dioxide, carbon dioxide, and whatnot that had been ejected into the atmosphere. Just really stark, the difference, and really an impressive thing to see. Scary in a lot of ways too. All right, the last movie I want to bring up here specifically, and then I'll let you see if you have anything that we haven't touched on. But we've talked about volcanoes, earthquakes, tidal waves, disaster movies in general. There's one disaster movie that encompasses all of these things, and it's not a very good movie by and large. Let me warn everyone about that. But I have to ask you, have you seen the Roland Emmerich disaster piece extraordinaire 2012?
No, and I refuse to watch it because it is absolute horrible. I've known people that watch it and they wish to have that time back in their lives, or they would rather hit themselves in the face with hammers due to the inaccuracies of the utter chaos that movie brought upon. It's like they said that based on just how they portrayed everything and how inaccurate it was, it took them out of the movie, and they was like, "Look, don't do it. I'm doing you a PSA. Do not watch this movie."
I have seen that movie. Again, I'm a sucker for big budget disaster movies. And first of all, the science is non-existent in that movie. Let's get that out of the way. You're watching that movie to watch the world end, basically. And as a result, Roland Emmerich decides to throw everything at the screen. Real quickly, to anyone listening live, we're down to under a minute of live time. Thank you also very much if you're listening live. The full show will be wrapped up in about, probably less than 30 minutes. We're going to be done here relatively quickly. So check back and hear the remainder of it, any movies that Jason and I discuss between now and then. And, plugs, because plugs are awesome. So thank you to everyone listening live. So again, he decides to kind of throw everything at you. There's giant tsunamis that, alter everything. There's earthquakes as a result of those. He nukes Los Angeles, which is, everyone kind of wants to do that, I think. Or at least watch it being destroyed. The Yellowstone caldera erupt, which is in and of itself an event that would significantly alter human existence on the planet. I mean, again, everything gets thrown at you for this movie. There's actually a very cool visual, actually. A Tibetan monk in Nepal. It's Nepal or Tibet. It's in that area. Again, around the Himalayan mountain range. He actually stands up and watches this giant tsunami that is wiping over the entire Earth sweep over the Himalayan mountain range, and watching that much water. I mean, again, the whole thing is CGI, but watching that much water cascade over mountaintops like that was a pretty cool visual. But no, it is kind of the essence of everything that goes wrong with disaster movies. Science that is non-existent. Your primary villain is Oliver Platt just kind of being a dick, which is what he does when he's on screen by and large. And he's made a good career out of it, so God bless him. But he's just kind of a dick. You've got John Cusack desperately trying to save his family. I mean, there's just the writing is iffy, the dialogue is poor. I mean, this is kind of how you don't want to write a big budget disaster movie. You need things to make sense, you need the scale, and again, the visual and the scale is very appropriate, but other than that, I mean, you don't care about any of the characters, you don't, again, I have very few positive things to say about that movie, and if you didn't see it in theaters, you don't need to see it, because the spectacle will be lost transitioning to a smaller scene, so.
Okay, and I have to ask you, you started talking about the scientific inaccuracies and everything. What about the inaccuracy of John Cusack being a hero?
Or Amanda Peet remotely finding him attractive?
Yeah, I mean,
No, look, John Cusack is a fine actor in the right role, but
he is not an action.
He's not an action. Look, the only action movie I've ever seen John Cusack in that I believed him in was Con Air, a personal favorite of mine from time to time I watch. And he's not the action star. He's very much a fish out of water for that movie, and which plays correctly with him, and they let Nicolas Cage be the action star, which makes much more sense. No, look, that movie, again, 2012 gets the wrong half of how to make a disaster movie correct. And sadly, again, the interesting stuff gets lost along the way.
Oh yeah.
All right, I think that's all I had to talk about as far as on my list here. Anything we haven't touched on that you wanted to?
Yeah, Plane Spire and Rescue. I love it.
All right.
Yeah, I just wanted to see your reaction when I mentioned a movie about planes that was a spin-off of the movie Cars. Yeah, it's outside of disaster movies. Only thing I've got, I just want to know. We'll touch on this real quick to kind of segue into everything. What's your expectations for San Andreas?
Oh boy, given what I've read, I've read others' reviews. I usually do, just to see if I agree or disagree. And again, look, reviewers are all colored by their own opinions and whatnot, so don't. Again, you look at a Rotten Tomatoes score. You can't go on that. You need to find some reviewers whose opinion you don't have to agree with all the time, but you can at least understand their perspective, or one who simply has similar tastes to you. Find specific reviewers and kind of go along with them instead of just, again, the aggregate. I'm hopeful it will be fun. That's kind of, again, it's a disaster movie. That's kind of my big hope, is you don't do anything too stupid. The CGI is not bad enough to take me out of the movie, and admittedly my threshold for that is much different from other people's. I hate bad CGI more than almost anything. The only thing I hate more, I think, is Ben Stiller movies. Sorry, shuddered there because Ben Stiller movies. But I'm hopeful again. Good action sequences, decent set pieces, characters that we can at least care about. Again, we're not talking Oscar-worthy development or anything, but characters that we understand and can, more or less relate to and root for. I'm just hoping to have fun at this movie, and again, technically and objectively, I'm sure I will have issues with it. But if I can't at least have fun at this movie, then the movie will have failed, pretty spectacularly.
I'm excited for it in the sense that I was not on board when I first started seeing stuff about it. Was not on board. The more clips, little clips here, little clips there that I've caught on cross promoting it on TV, interviews people's done that The Rock has done, and
The Rock's a one-man promotional machine. I mean, that man works harder to promote anything he's in than anyone else in Hollywood.
Oh yeah, I mean, no doubt that he's trying to, and he doesn't like to be called The Rock anymore. It's Dwayne.
Dwayne. I have a hard time adjusting to that, just because again, I was a wrestling fan as a teenager, kind of during the '90s when he was The Rock, and so I have a hard time. I understand why he wants to be, credited as Dwayne Johnson and whatnot, and to his credit, by and large, first of all, The Rock is a separate character.
Well, I mean, I just hope that in the theater that I'm watching this in, other '90s people growing up in the '90s that were wrestling fans don't join in with me when I start chanting "Die Rocky Die." But the only downside I see this is and this goes back to what we talked about at the beginning. As a first responder, the inaccuracy that I'm going to pick apart in the movie, that is what I'm scared is going to take me out of this movie. Because
I'll tell you what, after you see it, send me a list, and I'll get it on the air.
I know a lot of flight medics, and they're really skeptical that they refuse to go see this because they said that they won't be able to watch it and not point out every teeny tiny inaccuracy. And I'm like, well,
Well, when it's your job, whenever your job is translated to the big screen and they have to monkey with it, to make it, watch. Again, movies are their own entity. it's always difficult to see, either a profession or a passion or a hobby of yours translated and then altered to fit, appealing to the mass audience. It's very difficult. And so I tell you what, after you see it, send me a list of inaccuracies and whatnot, and I'll make sure it gets on the air for the review on Wednesday.
All right. Well, I'll do that. I'll because I plan on seeing it. I'll probably end up seeing it Sunday, and then I think we're going to touch on it. We're going to discuss a little bit of it Sunday night as well on Screaming Boy. So yeah, I'll definitely compile something together and get it to you.
Alrighty. That is going to wrap us up here. I think that's all the disaster movies I had that I wanted to talk about. So, Jason, thanks for being here. And what do you got to plug?
Only thing I got going on is me and Jesse are coming back this week. Probably going to do it tomorrow. It's going to kind of be us getting back into the swing of things, promoting the CP Swagger, which is the Cerebral Palsy Swagger interviews that we got coming up with Hunter Gandy, who, if people that have listened to the show previously know, is a young man from northeastern Ohio who, as a community project last year, basically took on raising awareness of cerebral palsy. Me and Jesse was lucky enough to become friends with him, interviewed him numerous times. He is doing the walk again, carrying his little brother Braden on his back, who suffers from cerebral palsy, from their high school wrestling gym to the University of Michigan's wrestling gym next week. Yeah, it's next weekend. It starts next Saturday. We're going to do a pre and post walk show with Hunter. On the post show, we're going to have our good friend Dan Hines, who is the co-founder of the charity organization that me and him have, of Dynasty Football Charity League. Outside of that, you can catch me popping up on Screaming Boy Productions podcast, reviewing, just going on rants and being typical Teasley, the evil ginger. Whenever they get together, they working out a schedule. Adam's in the process of selling his house, so they're kind of on a hiatus right now. This coming Monday, me and title card artist for Long Road to Ruin, Benjamin J. Cologne, will be appearing on source material covering the first 7 issues of my favorite comic arc, Maximum Carnage, with me being the evil ginger and Benjamin being a Spider-Man fan and Jesse being the referee in between. So I'm looking forward to that, doing source material with Benjamin and Jesse extensively. Been looking forward to it for months, since Jesse actually brought up that he wanted to cover Maximum Carnage. Outside of that, I'm not doing anything other than work.
Well, it's good to be working. All right, as for me, I will have live coverage of, believe it or not, UFC Fight Night 67 this coming Saturday, starting at 5 local. That's 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Alves versus Condit. Yeah, it's one of those Brazilian Fight Night cards, guys. What do you want me to do about it? I don't run the company. I just cover these. And then this coming Sunday on the 411 Ground and Pound radio show, myself and Jeff Harris are going to review UFC Fight Night 67. We'll preview UFC Fight Night 68, which is headlined by Dan Henderson and Tim Boach. Weak headliner, not a bad card, actually, when you look at the... So be on the lookout for all of that. This coming Wednesday, Mark Radulich and I will be reviewing San Andreas. I forget what the Long Road to Ruin has on Thursday, but I'm sure I'll remember it. I'll bring it up at some point in the future, but it is Thursday. The Mark and Robert Cooper reviewed, I think, Faith No More's album yesterday on the Metal Hammer of Doom, so this upcoming Thursday is going to be the Long Road to Ruin with Mark Radulich and Sean Comer. I'm not quite sure. I can't remember which franchise they're tackling this time around, but that's always a good show.
Actually, you're going to get a double dose this coming week, because Mark has informed me and Jesse that Tuesday they are doing a Metal Hammer of Doom.
Oh, sweet.
So yeah, they're taking over our Tuesday spot to do a special Metal Hammer of Doom. I think it has something to do with Mark's birthday, and he doesn't want to record on it or something. So
that is true. His birthday is coming up.
So yeah, they're taking over. So yeah, they're taking over.
They are the
that's
NWO.
why me and Jesse's scrambling to try to fit the pre-walk show in somewhere. So I think me and him's going to we might actually do the pre-walk show live tomorrow night if it's available. So, in worst case scenario, we'll record a show tomorrow night and upload it because now Blog Talk does not let you do multiple shows in one day like the old days.
No, they decided to charge a premium for that. Yeah, this site. Issues. I've got them. All right, so again, that's everything that we've got coming up in the immediate future. I'll be back next week, and if nothing else strikes my fancy, I'm going to put all of the names of great villainous actors onto my little roulette wheel of doom, and I'll spin that and see which actor gets a focus. My last one was on Tim Curry. I might have some kind of evil here. Now, we joke here at the Radulich Broadcasting Network about, the unpaid intern from the UFC or WWE or whatnot listening to our shows and then relaying our messages. But a couple of years back on The Long Road to Ruin, when Sean Comer and I did the Hellraiser franchise, after our first episode, it was a two-parter. In between our first and second episodes, news broke that we were getting a reboot of the franchise, a remake of the original, with actually Clive Barker writing it. And we'd like to think that, in some small way, our little podcast helped kind of spur that along. Last week I talked about Tim Curry and how I didn't think anyone could, overcome what he did as Pennywise the Dancing Clown. Lo and behold, a few days later, the director leaves the remake of It. I'm not saying it's my fault. I'm just wondering, maybe I've got some kind of, I've got like one or two influential listeners who wind up, making decisions about these things. And I might have some evil power. I'm just throwing it out there. But anyway, my last one was on Tim Curry. You can go back into the archives and listen to that. It's just me for 60 minutes, but, what are you going to do? All right, that's going to wrap us up here today, everyone. So thank you for listening. Many thanks again to Jayson for stepping in on short notice to keep me from talking to myself for another hour. My therapist tells me it's not that good for me. And, all right, so for the two of us, I'm Robert Winfree, reminding you all that even in a disaster, you need at least one douchebag to make the heroes look better. Otherwise, it doesn't work quite as well. Good night, everyone. And to further use the Radulich Broadcasting Network sign-off, be well, be safe, and behave.
So say good night to the bad guy.